Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Aaron Goulet. I'm the House Chief of Staff. I'm just here to get things kicked off. Obviously, you can see up here on our presentation display, the staff is here to provide you with some input and some ideas for your review and consideration. So we'll just have folks behind me from both the House staff and the General Court staff to just go over those items and be available for discussion and reference at any point in time. With that, I will hand it off to Ann Fitzgerald, who's our Director of House Committee Services, and she'll discuss with you the concept of a continuing education program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are again. I just want to, as you can see, we've laid out a portion again of presentations by the staff, as well as at the conclusion, we'll have information you requested at our last meeting. But the first item up for the piece I'm doing right now is continuing education. And I just want to mention that we have done, as a member had asked before, we've done continuing education in the past, whether it is for chairman, for freshmen at orientation, or for the entire membership, where we have had a full day just dedicated to study commissions and committees, or a half day. So we will be putting those proposals again together for the speaker. And we have a panel made up of, traditionally it's a panel of staff and legislators as well. And we have we go through every aspect of every possible configuration of a study commission. So we plan to do that again, and we will have that information for you moving forward at one of our future meetings. Dave Alacones will explain what the trifold piece is as far as handouts go. And then we are going to look at how we could design some videos to explain about members possibly requesting study commissions and the background. And as you know, we already have our video set up from our first meeting when we introduced the entire concept to you. And we keep asking staff to take a look at that, as well as members. We have, when people ask, we say, just please watch the first hour and a half to understand the background of study committees and commissions. So we have our first foray into a video, but we'll organize a system for you later as well. But as you can imagine, all of these efforts take time, and as we're in the middle of still of the legislative session, we want to put together a good product for you to see in the future. So with that, I can, Aaron, just turn it right over to Dave. Right? Thank you. Oh, wait, did you have any questions?
No, I have one question. The videos, would it be appropriate to have in continuing education for the setting to be maybe the two different caucuses showing these videos?
Well, that probably will be in the future, as we'll have all those proposals designed for you, so you can take, we should certainly consider that, because it's another avenue to communicate with the members beyond our traditional programs that maybe the videos could be disseminated through caucuses, but we could talk about that as an option.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you again, Dave Alacones, OLS Director.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you much, Representative Dolan. We have been talking the past several weeks, and one of the areas that OLS would like to pursue is having a brochure that explains the commission making process and the questions that members should ask of themselves and all others involved as they come into our office. Really, by the time that we get that email, or they're in our doorway, it's too late. That filing period is a very intense time. It's really not, it's not optimal to have that discussion at that point. So our goal is to have something out there well in advance. They say a brochure, it would be online also. And of course, there'd be information there that is more than what OLS requests or needs in filing legislation. So we will be working with Ann and House Committee Services and anyone else in this process, you certainly as well, to put something like that together. But that's a component of continuing education, certainly. We talked about the questionnaire at our point of entry in OLS, and the conclusion was that it has limited use because once we take that information in, it is privileged information. So a member could say, no, I didn't check with anyone, no, I didn't talk to anyone, and it sits with us, and you would no one else would know that. So that's kind of I don't think would meet what the desires were when we talked about that in the first case. So moving back to the continuing education and having information out there available before they come in our door is what we're going to be focusing on.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the, yes, Representative?
So I'm looking at the it says required in filing legislation to create and then implements. And down below, it says similar to tribal, required from who's doing the inquiry?
Well, I think I spoke with Ann earlier. That's kind of a holdout from when we were thinking about doing the questionnaire in OLS. And, but I think that would have limited, this is kind of a work in progress from some of these slides from last week. Again, the questionnaire will have much of that same information that we suggest that the member does in advance. So we want them to work together so that there's not conflicting information.
Any other questions from the committee? Thanks, Dave.
Thank you much.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Jim Cianci. This is Paul Smith. Just kidding. So we're here to talk just a little bit about some of the ways to increase visibility of commission bills. And one of the few things that we've discussed, so there was this discussion earlier on about creating a CN to add to the FN. And in discussion, we sort of hovered around the fact that we really think that would need to be done through legislation. Additionally, we get into sort of a word soup problem. You know, think of HB2, FNAL-CN. So we're getting into, you know, kind of confusing terms here. So what we suggested, by the way, these points are things that we can handle internally without actually having to change law or rules or anything. But the analysis, and we've highlighted an example here from a bill that was sponsored by John Hunt regarding liquor. Every time we have a bill that's an agency request, we list right on the analysis on the front page of each bill that what the bill does in terms of the analysis, but also that it was an agency request. And OLS has agreed that they will add in another line. This bill creates a commission, or this bill creates a statutory study. So that's going to be a huge indicator right there. Also, in terms of, we talked about the checkbox before, so I want to explain a little bit about what that means. When we purchased our XM Legislator software suite back in 2015, it was sort of envisioned that we would have this process to know right from the very beginning whether or not we would have, whether a bill would create a committee or a commission. Unfortunately, due to some misunderstandings and practices over the years, that really wasn't followed through with. However, we have found the problem, and we've corrected that problem. So now, once you go to file a bill in OLS, the attorney can check the box right from the beginning. If a bill is amended along the process, during the process at any time, either the House or the Senate clerk also have access now to check that box. So if a bill, as you know, many bills turn into studies. So we have that ability to check that during the committee process or during the bill's life. So those are things that we can do without necessarily changing the process. Additionally, we have asked our IT folks. I know you're all very familiar with the advanced bill status search on our webpage. On that page are a bunch of radio buttons at the bottom where you can click certain things that you want information. And the IT folks have told us that they can add a statutory committee or commission radio button so that you can search by that as something that would pull up a list for you of bills that were filed in any given year. So those are a couple of big things right out the chute that I think can help in terms of the visibility aspect. Again, that analysis right on the front page of every bill, that's going to be helpful in terms of the speaker's office, in whether it's the speaker or the deputy that's signing bills right from the get-go. And we're going to circle back to that in a minute. But right out the gate, that is a huge thing that will, sort of be that red alert button that we have knowledge of. So. And Anne has this bullet here, this consider HCS study profile. That Anne, do you want to address that?
Thank you. Well, I'll just stand up. It's probably easier. So what this is a plan. We just came up with this on Friday afternoon that our office will submit when a bill that is a study commission comes to our knowledge. We're going to be proactive and create. You all have a copy of it, and create this document like we're known for our side by sides. This would be on. Oh, I have them. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. So this will be a standard questionnaire that, or standard document, I should say, that we prepare for the committee, and we will do research with the sponsors of the bill to find out whether the commission is established through introduction or an amendment, or if make sure that and see if we can have a purpose statement provided by the prime sponsor as to why the commission is necessary. Does the bill comply with RSA 1449? You can see, you can read through this thing. We had a legislative study committee or commission in the last 5 years? Why is an additional study necessary? Is there a current study that could be amended to include this charge? If there are appointing authorities for non-legislative members, and if the non-legislative member appointees have been contacted and are willing to participate. So these were items that we had suggested to be in a questionnaire within OLS, and that's what David and I are talking about, seeing if that's one place where we could initiate these questions. However, when OLS gets that information, it must be confidential, but we might be able to find a way that they could share that with us if it was specifically requested. That comes back to House Community Services, and then we could forward on to the Speaker's office or to give it out to our chairs. And if we can't do it there, we would prepare this document for the committee. So if you're the chair of House Education, every study commission that comes before you, whether it's introduced or it is amended, the researcher will proactively get this information for you and get it to the chair. And because we want to highlight, since we can't do, as Paul mentioned, the CN designation, this would just be one way for these bills to stand out to the committee to see that it's unique and that it's not just a regular bill. It has a commission, a study commission attached to it. So this is all just suggestions. This is brainstorming by the staff. And we thought that this might be a possibility, and we'll bring it forward to you, obviously, to consider if this is an option. It wouldn't require legislation. It's just staff practices. But we just thought it would be a helpful item for all of our chairmen and our committee members.
Let me ask the committee, would you consider it worthwhile to have an additional question on here? Something like, has this proposed committee or commission been approved by caucus? So that coming through, whether it's been endorsed by the two leadership,
Well,
sides of leadership.
our research is always nonpartisan, so that's not a role that we would take
Okay.
on. I think it's a different discussion you'd have to have. This is all strictly staff, nonpartisan efforts.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing all this work. So I was just thinking about the whole issue of bills being private when they're formed, and of course this, I mean, when they're filed, and of course the subject matter is necessarily private, but these are just really like procedural questions. You know, so if you're concerned about releasing the information during the drafting process, you know, it's just like, has the appointing authority been identified? I mean, it's not like you're giving any great substantive issue about the bill away, right? I mean, it's kind of just details.
And I know this is an area where Dave and I
It's a
might have
fuzzy.
a little bit of a disagreement. I certainly respect their, you know, the fact that they want to maintain confidentiality with the members, particularly during drafting, and there's a legitimate reason for doing that. However, as you know, Representative Ewell, the privilege belongs to the client. And there's, in my mind, there's nothing that we couldn't do that if it's a questionnaire or some sort of waiver on behalf of the member, if particularly for study committees, if they wanted to have this information made available to others, the member could waive that, or they could be put on notice as an option. I'm not suggesting they would be waiving their entire confidentiality or even the substance of the bill, but those specific questions you're talking about, some of which would be included in here, some of which we considered for the questionnaire, I think we could certainly work on that issue. I don't think the confidentiality issue is it's not ironclad.
It's not a bar. Well, I mean, that's what I was just wondering where the confidentiality requirement came from. I mean, the big hurdle, I would think, for somebody who is filing a bill is whether they're filing the bill at all and whether they want people to know that. But none of this really that I can see gets to the substantive nature of the bill. It's more just the details of the bill. And if it is really helpful in moving the process along, I would think it would be useful.
Dave, go ahead.
Question concerning confidentiality, that goes back to a Superior Court case many, many years ago, when outside bodies, individuals were seeking all the information about how bills were filed, what was being presented by members. And so that is when the court ruled that this information that we receive is confidential. Yes, the member can waive it. Certainly, if any member wants to bring in an outside expert or agency or lobbyist, they can. That certainly kind of opens up a good part of things. But that's the origins, and we try to keep a tight lid on that. But certainly, we can look at a process that would have a waiver for this particular type of information.
So according to that, stretching back to that Superior Court ruling, is the filing of the bill, is it privileged, attorney-client privileged?
Yes, it's the information and all the information that is there. Now, certainly in the House, as soon as that LSR is entered and we give it a number, that current title at that point is put on the website. So that and only that is made public. So the sponsor and that working title is made public. All the other information that comes in is confidential. In the Senate, of course, the requesting member can ask that the LSR title be not disclosed. And so if we look at the LSR numbering, you'll see in many cases that the numbers are missing, and those are most likely LSRs that are kept confidential in the Senate.
Are the sponsors and co-sponsors?
In the Senate, no, nothing is listed until the bill actually becomes introduced in the Senate.
Interesting. Any questions? Yes, Karen.
So I'm just trying to think through, why is it more helpful to have this information before the bill is actually issued, the text? I'm just trying to think about the timing. You definitely want this information, I think, provided to the standing committees once the bill is official and numbered and all that sort of thing.
I think the reason why we initially thought of this at that point was that as the drafter is collecting the information from the sponsor on the LSR, they could say, have you done research to see, when was this studied last? Or what information, have you done research? Because as we've stated earlier, we do know that there are some sponsors who want an issue researched, and they believe that a commission is the vehicle for that, as opposed to turning to OLS research or our office if it's a full committee. So that's why at that point of entry, we were hoping, and we did hear from some members who have said, oh, I had no idea that there was a study. I mean, granted, everything I can share will be so anecdotal, but it just highlights that we thought maybe that point of entry would help and would cut down on some of them if they knew that a study commission on marijuana was completed just a year ago and now something's been recreated. So that's why. But if that's not possible due to confidentiality issues, that's where we're going to explore some other options. But we thought this would be partway through the system. And also, we did find out that a good number of commissions are created through the amendment process. So that's another reason why we thought it might make sense to do it further down the road.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
I was just trying to figure out when you were thinking you'd give it to the standing committees if the bill wasn't actually introduced yet, or what is that what
It would
you
be
mean?
once the bill's introduced.
Okay,
That's
all
what,
right.
yeah,
Because
not
the
before.
way it said draft, I thought you meant. Okay. That makes it easier for me. I was thinking that's
It-
good,
it's-
that's clarifying.
It says draft because we didn't want to make any assumptions. We were just proposing this idea. We're calling the paper a draft,
Oh, okay.
not the draft
I was
LSR.
thinking you meant while the bill was in
No.
process. Okay.
We were thinking it would go out to the members
Yeah.
on the public hearing day.
Yeah, Matt.
Thank you for the work that you've put into this. I'm curious if you've thought at all about how this would apply to Senate bills when they come over.
We're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes.
Great, thank you.
Are we ready to go on? Okay, we can go to the next page. Great. Additionally, we did discuss, there had been some suggestion, and I know it's come up in the past about sending commissions to a second committee. And what I stressed at that meeting was that we have a staggering amount of second committee bills. And for those of you on the Rules Committee, you also know that there's a discussion every other year as well about, is there enough time for us to act on those second committee bills? And because historically what's happened on a lot of those second committee bills is they're usually the last ones to come in. So we are usually dealing with a truncated amount of time. And so rather than creating a requirement where all study commissions or committees will go to a second committee for review, one of the thoughts was that we could create a new standing committee that deals exclusively with it, or we could amend the charge of one of the current standing committees to be the repository for all studies. And I know we've discussed in the past, Representative Ebel at Rules 2 terms ago, where legislative administration could possibly be the committee that houses those. But in either way, that would be sort of a rules change where we would create a new committee or amend the charge of one of the committees and designate that all of those bills go to that committee for the hearing process. Now, I understand in that process that it does take away sort of the policy element in that regard. But we're up against the wall, so to speak, right? The question is, if there's a list like Ann just suggested there that you know each standing committee is still going to deal with these commissions and committees, then perhaps that's a good way to winnow it down. The reality is that we have a lot of these bills that come at us, and sometimes it's easier just to look at it and say, oh well, it's just a commission. Let's easy hearing exec, get it out of here. But the reality is, does it comply with our new 1449? Does it have? Is this actually a legislative study committee or commission? And trust me, I've been having a lot of conversations with some members recently about, is this we have this commission that exists. The opioid abatement fund is a perfect example of this. A member has been repeatedly asking me questions about it, and I said, this is not a legislative study commission as defined by RSA 1449. And then it was like finally a light bulb went off. But the reality is that some of these things do get sort of policy heavy, and the policy committees might want to have that oversight. But if you want sort of a winnowing down, and that's the political question here. Do you want to winnow these things down, or do we want to really just create a more formalized mechanism? I thought that what we did last year with 1449 was a very, very good positive movement, and I've defended that several times, including in legislative administration where they just retained SB 84. So those are that's where your suggestions and discussion here are going to be important, and with specifically answering this question if you want to take this question up. Any?
Well, what's the impact of what we're starting to see now with language coming from the Senate where it says 1449 notwithstanding?
Okay, so let's move on to the next slide so we can address that a little bit more specifically. So, Jim and I worked on a little bit of rule language. So I'm going to pass along a draft proposal here that may help address that. Now, we all know that I will never besmirch the body on the other side of the wall. That being said, you all are aware that of their concurrent resolution rule, correct? That they won't take concurrent resolutions unless they suspend their rules and agree to introduce it. Well, that sort of was the thought process here on potentially addressing a similarly concerning issue on our side. And that is, so the proposed language is no bill or amendment to any bill which either establishes or amends any study committee or commission shall be introduced or considered by the House which does not comply with the provisions of House rules or statutes. So I want to be very specific here. Last week, you all heard that the Senate amended a new study commission regarding marijuana being run as a state-owned thing or a state-operated thing. Now, this amendment was not crafted stating notwithstanding, and in fact has a majority of outside folks as the decision makers. So this clearly doesn't jive with RSA 1449. So when it comes over, if this rule were here now, we would take a vote whether or not to even consider introducing it. Similar to what we've done in the past, if something has been indefinitely postponed, we put the question to the body as a whole as to whether or not to introduce it, because usually we just introduce in recess without any type of issue. So this would sort of address the 1449 issue. I'm not saying that this is the be-all, end-all, but it is a suggestion as to something that we might want to consider to try to assist in that regard. Jim.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit, I think part of it is resolving whatever issues, may arise in the Senate, whether it's the notwithstanding or this amendment, which we just learned about last week, that violates 1449. It doesn't even have the notwithstanding language. But it also, I think, alleviates some of the pressure that OLS deals with, in the sense that certainly they can advise and they try to make the members aware of 1449. But if they're sort of being told, this is what I want a majority of outside members, and either use notwithstanding or don't, it's within the purview of the House, much like the Senate has their own rules, to determine what we're going to consider. And I think, again, obviously, this is within your discretion in amending House rules, but I'd say a good place to start is making sure that our processes, what we consider, are compliant with the law. And 1449 is the law. And so I think in this limited aspect, it makes some sense to have a rule which says we're only going to consider those bills which comply with the law.
What happens to those rules? Is there some pushback to the Senate saying that this doesn't comply with our rules and therefore they have to start over again, or what?
So in that case, what would happen, similar to what happens when we pass a concurrent resolution or something along those lines, we send messages with those bills to the Senate. What would happen in this case, they would send a message back saying that they refused introduction pursuant to Senate Rule such and such. So that would be the same situation. It's ministerial. The work is it's all messaging and that sort of thing. So if they sent us a bill, they could, once we returned it, they have, I mean, the Senate can do whatever the Senate wants, but there are actions in which they can undo things that have been done. So that's within their powers as a
So the
body.
bill would die or stay on the, not use on the.
So it could die. It could die in terms of, just sort of existing in the ether, which is sometimes what happens. We say that, we have a miscellaneous status sometimes in our advanced search. That usually means the things that don't fit neatly into a specific category. So in that situation, that would be a miscellaneous status where the bill just kind of died in the ether. So it could come back in the second year. If they, corrected it, or as I said, that they have options to undo perhaps what was done and then perhaps send something different over to us or rescind the amendment and pass it down as it was originally.
Questions from committee?
Again, and this is a discussion for you all to have. This is not, I mean, obviously, we have to go to House Rules Committee with any rules changes, but it is a discussion point, a starter, if you will.
Yes.
I don't have a question as much as just a couple of comments. So, as far as the issue of commissions and committees going to a separate standing committee, I think that we really have to think hard about that, because that basically means that the policy, as the clerk pointed out, the policy piece of that won't be going to a policy committee. It's going to be going to a separate committee. I think that would be challenging. I'm not sure how our membership would feel about that. When we did our committee on committees, one of the things we really thought, though, should go to Ledge Admin is let Ledge Admin on an ad hoc basis do the review of the more moribund commissions that weren't really meeting as much, so Ledge Admin would be the one that would decide whether to, it would be sort of like what our committee on committees did, that Ledge Admin would make the recommendation as to maybe repealing a commission. And it would really work once we have our system in place that House Committee Services is really tracking the commissions that exist and how much they meet and all that kind of stuff. They would have the background data that they could go ahead and do it on. As far as the idea of a House rule to enforce 1449, I mean, I don't think that there's that much that's particularly controversial in 1449, except the issue of requiring that the legislative members of the commission constitute the majority of a commission. And I mean, I don't know what the Senate is doing, but I would think one of the things that they may be notwithstanding is the membership, the majority membership of the commission being legislative members. And I understand where the idea for that comes from. You want to give the power to the legislators, but, you know, if people are creating a stakeholder commission, that part might be a hurdle. So we might want to think about that some more.
To Representative Ebel's point, yeah, SB 84 definitely undoes entirely everything good we did in 1449 last year. It actually, I mean, it changes the 15 member thing to our actual chaptered studies, which is silly in and of itself to me, because we have a hard enough time getting our 3 and 2 or 4 and 1, where those folks actually show up and participate. So to suggest that that should be 15, I thought was sort of silly. Whereas they left the commissions, they sort of reverted back to basically, and let's be honest, we all know what the problem is here. We know it's the 45 member commissions that are driving the bus on legislative policy that are outside of your all's control. And I think that that's a big concern for many of us here in this room, and that is something that SB 84 completely reverted to. And I think that that is sort of their policy, that, and I think that's probably a fundamental disagreement we have with them. One of the good things that I thought did exist in that bill that I think we should look forward to in terms of operational procedures is the outside agencies hosting those studies that are conducted in that manner. To the point about legislative administration, I certainly agree, Representative Ebel. I think that legislative administration has that power now to do that. The chair has the ability to create any type of subcommittee, and frankly, the subcommittee pursuant to the standing rule of legislative administration can actually report to the full House floor without even having to go to the full committee. So I do think we do have that ability, and we should perhaps gently nudge the committee to maybe do that on a biennial basis. So I definitely see your point and agree. And again, I for discussion purposes, that's why we had the section about the second committee versus a separate standing committee. I tend to agree with you. I think we don't want to necessarily take that policy position away from the decision makers. Somebody on legislative administration really probably doesn't have much understanding of the average solid waste working group that Environment and Agriculture would. So for that reason alone, I tend to agree with you, but for discussion purposes, we put it to you.
I just had, so what I think our committee on committees had hoped was that the rule where you establish the responsibilities for ledge admin, we actually would include, add to their responsibilities the requirement that they review periodically the existing commissions. That was the idea, because I agree with you, they already have that power, but if you add to the rule that they have the responsibility to do it, that would be good. I hope one of the things that comes out of this is that there is somebody specifically tasked with routinely reviewing the commissions that exist, because it's too hard for 10 years to pass by and all of a sudden we're going back to the way, well, we have like every decade we review everything, but if those guys could do it annually and with the updated list, I think that would help a lot.
If you'd like, I'm certainly, as you know, I'm happy to work with you on any amendments to rules. Obviously, this fall we'll need to kind of come back together anyway, the Rules Committee, that is, for other purposes, and presumably if this committee has additional rules recommendations, that would be good to present as a package.
We have with us this, both the speaker and a speaker emeritus. Either of you have any comments about what the recommendations are, or what you might like to see us focus on?
Less is better. I think the speaker said it very well. This has always been an issue in the House, and it's just to repeat what is already said. My biggest concern about commissions is you're not only putting stakeholders at the table, you're actually giving them a vote of the final outcome that committee is doing. And to me, that should really be a legislative responsibility. Thank you. And thank this committee for its doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Certainly appreciate it.
Thanks. We're just digging in. Yes, Representative Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for all of you for being here and telling us what you are saying. I wouldn't want to put the full responsibility with Legend Men, because I'm thinking back when I was on judiciary, we were quite capable of deciding whether something should be a commission or not. I'm going back one more time to the Right to Know Commission, and what a burden that became for everybody. I think that committee could very well have said, let's dissolve the Right to Know Commission, because it was producing nothing positive for years, couldn't even get a quorum. So I wouldn't want the total responsibility with one committee. I would like to believe that, say if something went before Health and Human Services, for example, they could say whether or not that bill should pass based on the information contained in the bill and what they would expect the commission to accomplish.
Thanks. Yes.
But am I understanding this correctly? Ledge admin would be charged with just once a biennium meeting with House Committee Services, going over their list and seeing which ones are not active and creating legislation to remove those, right? So it's not like,
Kind of what I was thinking.
okay, that's what I'm.
And it shouldn't, so it shouldn't be like, 200 the way we did it. It might be 10 or 15. Right.
It would depend, however, the charge is drafted and rules would be.
Speaker.
I think one of the biggest issues we've had, and sure, Representative Shurtleff will agree with me on this, is finding people to serve on these committees and commissions. And I'm sure you remember, Representative Gilbo, that it's when you've got many more than 5, and 5 is pushing it, it becomes nearly impossible to fill all those seats. So when you're talking about commissions that have maybe 5 reps and 3 senators or 2 senators and 15 other people on it, if you were to reverse that, good luck finding enough people to serve on it and having that commission to ever even have enough to form be able to have a quorum to meet. I'm not sure which direction you want to go. That's why you're here having all these discussions. But finding people to serve on these committees and commissions consistently is getting harder and harder. And especially sometimes when they have to be a certain member, a certain amount from one committee and a certain amount from another committee and then a certain amount from another committee. Now you're looking at calling all 3 chairmen, trying to find out who they might recommend to be on it. The time that the staff is spending on this thing is ridiculous, and it's tying up a tremendous amount of time. So I'm hoping we can come to some solutions here that will both help the staff and help us get through these things, but there's a lot to consider here.
I totally agree with you. It's a burden to stay.
Matt?
I'm trying to remember. Oh, I know. I was thinking about the process in Ledge Admin if we decided that there would be some annual maintenance or biannual maintenance. I know it depends on how it's set up in rules. I'm curious if one of the ways to do that is by introducing a bill that's just for that purpose. It's similar to the budget bills. You introduce something so you have a vehicle that can then be used to get rid of, or
Sure,
dissolve.
like an HB 25 type deal, right? I understand what you're saying. A placeholder type thing. Yep. Good point. Good suggestion.
Want to develop a little further, Matt? Example what you're.
Well,
how it
just
works?
because otherwise the work of the ledge admin committee or subcommittee would have some ideas and say, okay, we want to dissolve these committees or commissions, but then they don't have anything to, and then they have to attach it to a bill that's totally unrelated, right? So it could be just at the beginning of every term, just like we do with HB1, HB2, capital budget. You know, you introduce an additional bill that ledge admin could then use for the purpose of dissolving committees.
This would be a standing bill that would be reviewed every year or every biennium.
Yeah, depending on what the rule was, and I think that can be part of further discussion. I don't know that we need to get to that
I
today.
think that's a good idea, because otherwise, I mean, what happened to us, you make the recommendation to repeal something, and then you have to introduce a bill the next year. And this way, if you had sort of a base, you could just use it right away. I think that's a good idea.
Thanks.
Just getting
Yeah.
to the speaker's point and having gone through this, the assignment to commissions is just brutal. But not to get back to the point again, but, that's another thing to sort of balance if you want, I love the idea of capping the number of members at 15, but if we really want to make a majority of each commission legislators, that does put more of a burden on the appointment process and the legislator participation. So it's just something to think about. But another thing is, in our standing committee chair training, which I really think they should have their own sort of training on how to review study committees so they know what to look for. They can be asking their members, okay, well, if you're enthusiastic about creating this, are you willing to participate in it? I mean, sort of like our idea about asking senators, well, if you want to create this thing, are you willing to serve on it? But, and take their names.
The speaker has given me a few examples of where requests have been made to create a commission or a committee with the caveat, but don't put me on, I'm too busy.
Well, as I've said right along, prime sponsor for every committee or commission that comes before my desk.
They're the first name member.
It's gotta be first.
Just,
Yes,
and
Karen.
just one other thought, some of the study committees that people are wanting to form are on such unbelievably narrow topics that you could also, when you're talking to the chairs or whatever, they could talk to their standing committees and say, okay, well, if this is something that you would like to study, and I know that Ann Fitzgerald has mentioned this many times, there's no reason why a standing committee can't study it as an ad hoc thing themselves.
Or
And
as
not-
or as a subcommittee.
Yeah,
within
or
that
as a
committee.
subcommittee, right, to just really do that work right within in the committee.
Right.
Because because some of them really are, if you think a lot of these study committees, they meet maybe 3 times. If it's a really narrow subject, a standing committee could do it.
Yes, Matt, go ahead.
I guess going down that path, would want to make sure that all the power didn't rest with the chair to establish that ad hoc committee or the subcommittee. I think when we think about how study committees or commissions are established, right, they go through the legislative process, the entire chamber votes on it, then it goes to the other chamber. It puts a lot of power in the chair, and so I would just want to figure out how we can make sure that at least maybe the committee has an opportunity to say we're going to vote on this as a committee to establish a subcommittee, or ad hoc is maybe a little bit different. It's kind of a little bit less formal, but and if the subcommittee is going to be formed, with some expectations that they're going to report back with some recommendations.
Have it a collaborative decision.
Yeah, John.
I know for a fact that even as we speak, Chairman Hunt has charged certain parts of the government to bring back reports so that we can work on bills that we have retained. So he kind of sent that message out to them so that we can work on the retained bills without having a subcommittee or a commission to do this work. And it's a matter of fact that we do this all the time in commerce.
So I appreciate that, and I do think you've heard me use the term culture before in respect with respect to these types of issues, and unfortunately we have sort of a culture of especially with one body where a study commission, hey, it's a signed bill. It adds to my past legislation streak. So there is a culture of let's just study it and we'll have a report, and if we file legislation, great. If we don't, whatever. I do think that we are looking to change that conversation, and changing cultures can be kind of hard. So that's why the work you're all doing is so important here, because this is going to be a cultural shift if we talk about making some changes that are going to affect statute or rules or whatever. That is going to be a big hurdle. It's going to be a tough pill for some folks to swallow, especially the other body.
Yes, Representative Paul.
Thank you very much. You just made me think of something, Paul. What are other states doing? Do you know? I'm sure you do. Can you tell us what processes they use that might be more efficient than ours?
Well, that's so. First off, you're not going to find a state as efficient as ours, but it's true, because the reason is that every bill gets a hearing, every bill has to go to the floor. That's what separates us from other states, and the fact is that beyond that, just the fact that we have hearings and a lot of bills get subcommittees, many states can't even claim that. So when we're talking about our actual deep dive studies, I mean, we're heads and shoulders.
We also know, actually, Dave mentioned that there are some other states who also have a panel that reviews whether a commission or committee should study, but it's made up of legislators, but it doesn't go through the legislative process. It's just an outside commission that you would have to go before with your proposal on what you would like studied. Wyoming, or Jen, you knew it, right, Dave?
I can't remember.
Or Wyoming or Montana? Out west.
I remember Wyoming, if I remember correctly. It's my caveat. But their culture is very different from ours, where it seems like the standing committees will basically create like a study agenda for the interim, where they prioritize what their study priorities are for the year. They go before, I think it's called the Legislative Management Council, if I'm not mistaken, for approval of those priorities, and then they go forth in the interim, and that's their job.
So let me kind of review, but my understanding of what's kind of on the table right now is that we lean on Legi Admin to review what's happening on some periodic basis, and or a special commission like this, or a committee like this, that reviews proposals for study commissions and the status of ongoing commissions. Do I see those both as competing? No, I got it wrong.
No, I don't. So the way legislative administration currently operates, so their definition in rule does address very specifically. It says creation of statutory and chapter study committees and like entities which address the legislature and its procedures. So that's their caveat now, but it's about the legislature and the legislative procedures. So that's their purview at the moment. We're talking about, well, it has been talked about creating an additional charge within legislative administration that on a biennial basis they will sponsor or support a list of bills or review a biennial basis of commissions and that sort of thing that can be repealed. I will just mention too that another great caveat of RSA 1449 is that all new commissions sunset after 5 years. So that's a huge win in terms of being able to cull this in the future. So if you wanted to put something in rule, I would leave it nebulous enough that it doesn't say specifically, you have to repeal this every single year or whatever, because in a few years, if this group or the next group comes together and repeals everything that's old that can be gotten rid of, within 5 years, all those other ones are going to be gone anyway. So they're, the charge is going to exist, but it won't necessarily be an active one. So hopefully the self-fulfilling prophecy is gonna work.
But also I heard that, that we might want to put a kind of a fill in the blank, standard piece of legislation at the start of each session. Would say that we're going to.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I would suggest having it be in the second year of the session, similar to House Bill 2024, which is the 10-year plan, because in the second year you're more likely to have results from the first year of research or whatever, because that first year that committee can devote to doing some of that legwork, and then in the second year you'd have that. And we do address in rule as well, that certain bills can come in
Now,
basically
would
at
there
any
be-
point.
Is there any objection procedurally to have that happen as part of the consent calendar, or does it have to, all these things would have to?
Well, no,
come
you still
before?
have to go through the process. I mean, the bill would still have to have its hearing and all that sort of thing. So it's not, that it would be subject to any other rule regarding legislation.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
But the good news about that is there'd be a proposed list of committees or commissions
Oh, yeah.
that are to be dissolved. It gives those, the chairs of those commissions or members of those commissions or, industry that's impacted by those commissions to come and make their case. And say
Absolutely.
whether or not they, no, we want to keep going, and we're going to give you some assurances that we're going to do this in the right way. We're going to be in compliance with kind of the new rules and protocols and standard operating procedures of commissions moving forward.
And that's why you still need the public hearing process for exactly for that purpose.
And I think I would rather, and I think we're headed in this direction, would rather, as a committee, spend time thinking about the future rather than this committee taking time to look at all, go through all the different committees and commissions that exist and say, oh, we should cut these. Let's leave that to ledge admin.
So would that public
Sorry.
hearing process? Sorry, would that public hearing process happen here? It happen Ledgy admin? Where would happen?
It would be legislative administration. If that's what you want to do, if that's the way you want to craft it, then yeah, it would be the policy committee that would have the hearing on the bill.
Okay, so originally I was understanding that we would work with House Committee Services because they kind of look over this like they did for us today to tell us the 5 that they feel that can be repealed. Would you continue to do that and then you would bring that to Ledge Admin, or would it be our charge to go through every commission and committee
Good question.
every biennium?
Well, I think we would continue to do that because we are your committee staff and you charge us with doing work for you. So I believe we'd still be involved, but as you know, that's part of the piece of working with IT and with Deborah to develop a good system that will have, that's electronic, that will help support all this. But absolutely, yeah, we'd still be working with you.
Yes, Representative Wall.
Thank you. Good question. Okay, so we're talking process and ledge administration taking care of this and all. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. It's a good idea. What about the subject matter beyond the process? You have to, I would think whoever handles these has to have an understanding of what the subject is that we would be establishing the committee for. That was not what
No.
we did. No?
Representative, I think the question is the bill that comes in the second year. In terms of, because HCS is going to work with LegAd, because that's never going to change. We're not expecting you, Representative Sheehan, to open up your, your notebook, and with magnifying glasses. That's not, nobody's suggesting that. But I think with respect to a bill that would come, that would be crafted, that notice of when, hey, these 10 commissions are on the chopping block, the chair, either the chair or HCS or the speaker's office would reach out to those various chairs of committees and say, hey, FYI, this bill is on the agenda next week or whatever.
That's
what
my
would-
expectation,
Yeah.
thank you.
So what would OLS's role be in crafting that legislation?
Well, it would be the same as in crafting any other. So the work is going to be done by the committee with y'all, and the committee itself can actually vote to introduce legislation and bring legislation forward. So that's something within the committee's purview now. They can vote, in the fall to introduce this legislation. It'll go through the drafting process as any other bill would and get assigned and that sort of jazz.
Yes.
And if this is implemented within rules, bottom line, this is going to eventually help the speaker's office. If we look at this every biennium and cut off the dead weight, so to speak, this is ultimately going to help the speaker's office with all the appointments.
I do think so. I do think that, whether or not you like the language that was in this proposal from Jim and I, whether you want to go forward with something like that, I think that definitely is going to be a catch. That is going to help. I also think that, if you want to craft more narrowly, whether it's in statute, even if you want to amend 1449 further in terms of winnowing it down a bit, in trying to catch some of these rogue or runaway commissions, then that's a potential as well. But that's why you're all getting the big butts.
I just want to confirm again that House Committee Services will be working, if Ledge Addis Committee or any standing committee, we will work with you. And that's why we're trying to develop these systems to help you look at whether it's subject matter or the size or whatever it may be. But for instance, another anecdotal situation, we had a researcher who worked with her, pointed out to the chair that this commission was already in existence, made sure the committee knew it, but they passed it anyway. So that's why possibly some other, we're looking or hoping you will come up with other suggestions as to how we can guide. We want to do continuing ed for the chairs of the standing committees, all the policy committees, but also see if legislative administration is another tool, just to find out why would you have two commissions on a similar subject, which is one of the things that we're trying to get at. But we will make sure that there are systems in place that all the membership will know about, and particularly the chairs through continuing ed.
Paul, do we need to modify 1449?
Again, that's up to you. I only mentioned it if you wanted to sort of make it more stringent. Again, I do think the section that's in SB 84 that's been retained in Leg Admin that deals with the outside agencies hosting, I do think that is a strong, just based on our experience over the last 2 years of having these outside groups, state agencies hosting. I do think that has been beneficial, just in terms of maintenance.
Matt, you had something that you wanted to
I
add?
guess I just wanted to refocus this on the culture change piece, and I think that some of the work, that's been put together for today's session, just around trainings and what kind of, briefings need to be made to chairs, to the caucuses, et cetera. It's really important. I mean, it's like this. You don't just snap your fingers and say, okay, we're going to make these changes and everyone's going to follow along and things are going to be different. Like, this is about making sure people really understand, making sure our colleagues really understand why this is important, why we're, proposing new rules changes, why we're proposing, perhaps changes in statute, or why we're just saying, hey, there's this worksheet that isn't going to require legislation that, OLS is going to be able to, work with members through.
To-
All of it contributes towards a culture change and the desired outcome, which I think we all share, which is, a smaller number of these committees and commissions, and or at least, a way to phase them out if they're not being productive.
Well, and
contributing.
I think truthfully, even if you all decide not to do anything with rules changes or the statute, at the end of the day, I think that's fine. The fact is that we've changed the way we're going to draft legislation with the analysis and the fact that we're going to make those more searchable right on our advanced bill search. I think that is going to be exponentially beneficial to you all, not just to you all, but to all members and to the outside world.
So does it make sense? Are we in some agreement here that when Ann develops that video training, that we take that to our caucuses and share that training and advocate for this cultural change?
Well, Mr. Chair, could we possibly, maybe in a future meeting, we could bring forward what we've done in the past so that some people who are new would find out what we've done before as far as continuing it and show you, it can be added to your binder, but show you the examples of what we've covered and how we've done that all, and then proceed with the videos, but just to show you the work that's been done so you can look at that and see if that's how you want to proceed with the continuing
I
ed
think it's going
component.
to be very powerful if the caucus leaders bring forth a very similar message to their membership. This is a new way of doing business. It's a cultural change. We need to embrace this going forward, and we need to all work together. I think that would be a very powerful message. But we're going to need to come to grips with us and have a hand-holding session before we leave that topic.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I do want to just say, working with Ann over the years on these things, I mean, our focus has always been from a nonpartisan standpoint. And when we have continuing education sessions, they are always non-political.
They're nonpartisan.
Yeah.
All staff is nonpartisan except for the two caucus
I'm just thinking
officers. So
the
what we
dissemination
think.
process. Whether
Right, but so we would not be part of that. I mean, we usually aren't. So all of the continuing ed has always been for all the membership. And obviously chairs, but I know that I've given Dan Mason some messages, say, could you ask some ranking members during your meetings to just remind them of meeting the deadlines for the calendar, for instance, for committee reports, things of that nature. But for the most part, as Paul said, we never step foot into a caucus situation.
Let me throw this out. Is there a better dissemination process other than a caucus session? Showing
The
video?
continuing education, that's why I'd asked if we could come back and I can show you exactly what we did for those full day programs or half day, usually the speaker. Because we used to have a continuing education program that went throughout the year. We had all different subjects and that stopped obviously with COVID, as everything else has. And obviously now that we're getting back into the swing of things, that may be something we haven't had an opportunity to meet with the speaker yet. But that also, it's a bipartisan effort in education, and the panelists represent both caucuses, but a good majority of your staff don't think in terms of caucus, they think in terms of the entire house.
Yeah, I'm just
and
thinking of the
educating the house.
mechanics of it. Would it be a session in the hall for
That's where
everybody?
we've had it, that's where we've had them, or 210, 211, or in the hall. Usually 210, 211 is a better venue, and we have panels that goes all day. We start at 9 a.m., tea, coffee, continental breakfast, and then we go in and we have subject matters, and that's why I want you to see these. And we've had them every two to 3 years it goes all the way back to the late 80s that we've had these info sessions.
So, and would the caucus role be to promote the upcoming continuing ed, or maybe to
I think so, but
encourage people after the fact to review the materials if they didn't get to attend?
I think that would help, but I also think that we put a box. That's how the box in your house calendar, it started from continuing ed. Now the box where we highlight any information we want you to have, that would go there, and then also the speaker's message has it, and it's announced on the floor. And then, of course, the support when you're in the caucuses would be another avenue to get the information out. But it's also trying to make sure people attend.
Mhm.
That's very helpful because we can work as hard as we can, but the people who should attend don't always attend. But it's a good info session, but then hopefully the videos they would be able to sit and listen to the video.
Yeah.
Well, I was just wondering, as far as timing, when we could have a continuing education on this. I'm not sure, I mean, I don't know if we can get it in
Well,
did you have
you
an
know,
idea on that?
I was
'Cause we
going to
have
ask
bill
this.
filing coming and,
I was going to ask the speaker about that when we could have an Aaron, when we could have a day to do that because you're right with the bill filing and to get people because they are well attended. When we had these in the past, remember we were 306, 308 because I remember we had about at least 120 and sometimes as many as 150 members show for these continuing ed
Okay,
programs.
was my concern.
Yes, they show
That's
up.
why I was thinking caucus meeting, because people typically
Right.
attend the caucus meetings.
Here-
but
They do
I'm
show
just
up.
looking
But
for a way to get high attendance.
So last time we were overflowing. We had 210 to 11 set up audience style, so all the way to the very front of the room. It was packed.
And we
Oh,
have
good.
people out in the hall with all the doors open listening. So as you know, Reps Hall can often be, if you don't have 400 people in there, the acoustics can sometimes be difficult. So that's why we like to do it in committee room. But we had a huge crowd and we must have had at least 15 chairs and other members present throughout the day as well as staff.
Do we open those training sessions to the public or to the press or anything?
Well, not typically because it's continuing education for the members. So you want the members participating and asking the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just sitting here thinking about a lot of the good thoughts that have come up already. I was wondering, as part of the vetting process for commission bills, if they couldn't go before the rules committee, just the same methodology as a late filing of a bill. And that the rules committee vet those questions that have already been proposed to see that the members already done their homework on the bill. And just something to think about. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Karen.
I just have a couple. So I just wanted to point out on this question of the ledge admin responsibility for reviewing old commissions. So already in our statute, House and Senate Committee Services are jointly preparing an updated index of all the commissions with relevant information annually. So they're going to be doing that, and that's really building on the charts and everything that we had for our original committee on committees. So in some ways, you're just sort of tracking what we did, but it was really, it wasn't substantive based at all. It was really just an objective review of who was still doing their function. The other thing we did do is there are many commission requirements or statutes that are flying around out there that needed cleaning up. So we did a little bit of that. The other thing that we did is we reduced some legislative membership. So you can do some of those sorts of things as part of the ledge admin role. And I really think as we make more and more progress, we always have our charts updated. We have these new rules in place that over time, it'll help the speaker's office and we ought to be diminishing in the number of commissions that are hanging around out there. So I guess the only other thing I was really hoping to see from OLS is this sort of template that you guys do use for creating study committee and commissions. They have to fill in the blanks, you know. You had talked about that as sort of a computer. I think it would be really helpful to see a form that's being used that you have to fill in when you're creating one of these things. Because we have the Q&As here. But sometimes it's good to just see the
What's the form
template.
look like?
The template.
Again, it's built into the software that we use, but we can certainly
It's printed out.
bring a printout of that that shows a bill in process, if you will, with the grayed out areas that get filled in.
It would certainly be good for part of the training.
Well, I just think it would be really helpful because then you can see when, you know, when somebody's gonna go in there to create a committee or commission, they're gonna be asked every single one of these questions. I know they're here too, but it's also just nice to see the form. It would be, and I think it would be helpful for the committee to see what that looks like,
Agreed, good idea.
because maybe we're missing something. I don't
We'll
know.
get that out.
Okay.
Ian, anything else?
The next item that we have is the commissions to review, which we handed out to you. And and there were, so as we discussed at the last meeting, when we were asked to look this up, we knew that Representative Ebel's two studies had pretty much culled as much as possible. They had really gone through the list in a very deliberative and substantial way. And you can see, again, that's in your binder. In the report, you see the questionnaire they had submitted to all those groups. So when we talked with Representative Ebel, we thought there would only be maybe 10 or less, and we found 5. Deborah does know of a few more that she's going to add to this list, so we will be adding a few more. But, and we didn't, and I mentioned this to Representative Dolan before we met, the OPLC ones we left as EDNA is examining that right now, so we did not add them to this list. But these are the 5 right now, and as you can see, we use the same layout that Representative Ebel's commission used, and it'll have the year established, the Associated State Department, the agency comments at the time, and the notes. And then we added our own staff knowledge. So for instance, the first one that's listed here, Commission to oversee the John G. Wynant Memorial. We have an expert on it right in the back row, who may be the chair of the committee, who may be able to respond to that one. Then we have obviously Commission on Demographic Trends. You can see what's listed there. State Procurement, County State Finance Commission, and the last one, the Interbranch Criminal and Juvenile Justice Council, which we staffed, but then again, as we say about everything, during COVID, we don't know if it broke up or exactly what happened with that. So these are definitely 5 that we could add to the list. And when it says, so we had, for the bullets, we have to consider with meeting with the chairs one-on-one, like you could ask the chairs why, if they are in existence or staff, you don't have to call them in. We can submit a similar questionnaire that Representative Ebel had prepared, and we could get your approval and send it out for you and get a response, or whatever you choose. Or if the member is here, you can always ask them in person. Then the next bullet is to discuss their commissions for the potential repeal, if they still need to exist, consolidation, or to find out why they are needed. Because, for instance, one member suggested, well, let's take subject matter. So say education, for instance, and education has 20, I'm just using this as an example, it's not exact, but say education has 20 commissions tied to it. Well, 12 of those may be federally required, so that's why they're in existence. And you need that to accept federal funds, or if similar with HHS. So we do know that there are a bunch of those commissions that exist, but have to exist for reasons other than
Well,
just a
you
study.
know, one thing that Paul mentioned, that we have this new rule to 5-year sunset. These are all 5 years old. Would they automatically just sunset because of that?
Well, that law was passed just last year. So I don't know what the point of the 5-year sunset. Perspective. We have to find out with each one how that fits in. So I have to read that legislation exactly, see how it would apply, or the law to see how it would apply to this. Okay, it's prospective.
He's nodding. It's
Okay.
prospective. I mean, I think we even talked about that. We really couldn't go backwards. So
Okay,
it's prospective.
okay, so
all
it's
new
moving
ones-
forward.
Yeah.
So everything is created new, which, speaking of created new, you have another list in front of you that lists all the current proposals for studies this term. I believe the total is 36, 8 of which are commissions. That will be updated because we just found out about the marijuana commission that just came across from the Senate. So we will need to add that. We will be updating this list, but these are all the new proposals by subject area. So you'll see that it's by, I believe it's by each committee which approved those studies. And I know that Deborah plans to, obviously, as I mentioned, she will update this, and there will be another piece where Deborah will be here to talk about the improvements. She's been working very closely with IT for data cleanup and IT solutions, because we know that that's where this all sits in helping us track all of these. And as we've mentioned before, the staff has been working very diligently in the background to make sure that we look at every aspect. And as each office is working on something, then all of a sudden we cross over, create something that another office could utilize. So we're trying to keep all those lines of communication and meetings where we can fit them in while working in the middle of our current legislative cycle. We also, in the House Community Services, we're going to be working with Dave. We came up with some another proposal, which is a questionnaire. We just did a dummy questionnaire that could be utilized, and it incorporates. It's a Google Doc, so it would be electronic, and incorporates many of the questions that we had in that HCS profile that we provided for you earlier. And we'll work with Dave to see how that could be utilized in getting the information for future legislation. But it's items like that we're trying to make sure all of our officers are coordinated, because we don't want to. What we did find out is that many offices in the past, we were all working in our own silos, and we really need to, because we have a good staff, but we're limited, and so we need to make sure that we're utilizing all of our resources to best possible solutions. So anyway, I think that's all that we had. Erin, did you think of anything else that we needed to add today? Okay, so I think we're all set, and Deborah will probably get in touch with us if there's other items that she wanted us to add to today. I know that at the last meeting, you had just asked us to come up with the items that we've shared with you, but as the staff started working on everything, we were coming up with all these ideas, and then we asked, could we have one more week? Because as I mentioned, sometimes just those 4 days between your two meetings, we're scrambling, but we wanted to present a good product to you again that can be utilized and hopefully answer your questions.
Not meet for 2 weeks, so is there more that needs to be done for you guys to come back in 2 weeks, or?
I think that we'll talk with Deborah. So we'll give you a report on the IT solutions, and we'll work with House Community Services. We'll work with Legislative Services and fill in some of those gaps. And we will, so your list that you have will be updated. Of the 5, we'll add more to that. We'll have a proposed list of questions that you may want us to send to the chairs of those commissions, unless you want them to come in and speak with you.
I mean, we had the people come in. But what we did actually, we had the agency come in that they were associated with, and usually the chair or something. And what we usually did was we also checked with the chairs of the standing committees if they had any ideas on things, which I was just going to say, and I don't know how hard it would be, but I think it'd be really useful to have another column on this chart for the standing committee that's responsible for the policy.
Yes,
For the
we'll do that.
No,
Yes.
the standing policy committee that's associated with these.
With that's the 5, the list of the 5. Yes, we will do that.
Yeah. 'Cause
Agreed.
then if we wanted to check, or,
Mhm.
that would also be useful on an ongoing basis for standing committees who get this whole big chart so they can zero in on what they're responsible.
Yes,
You
we
can
will do
cut it-
that.
You can cut it by committee too.
Yes,
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
This
that's
group is-
another,
belongs to Congress, this belongs to.
well, yeah, you could
HHS.
reformat the, just by
We can do
pushing
that.
the Excel
I
button.
wonder if the standing committee chairs know what their responsibilities are, or know what they're,
No.
what they're associated with.
well, that is one of the other charges that you gave to us last week, so that's what we're trying to do with that. The entire report is trying to break it down, and that's an IT component that we're working on, so education will have that 20, but then we'll also have a column in there that says federally required, or whatever that may be.
You were the chair of municipal and county, did you know all the committees that you're responsible for? I don't, vice chair of commerce, I don't have a clue.
Representative Wilhelm has a question.
Just a quick one. Do you already in one of your spreadsheets already have indication of which commissions are federally mandated?
Yes, there are some. That's how we found out when Representative Ebel did her study, and that's where we, so that should be there, but we have to be, but we've had so many different charts since then. That's why we want to have this final absolute chart generated from IT, not
Mhm.
from House Community Services and the Senate Clerk's office, and then the Speaker's office. We want one master chart that every office will refer to. So that's what we're building, and it's taking a while to build that.
Great. So one of those columns would
Mhm.
be federal, and that way we make sure that we're not going back and eliminating a federally mandated
Yeah. So
commission.
there's a column here that has the statutory citation, so maybe that's maybe where you could fill it in. So it's funny, I see county state finance on this. This is when I've referred to one that has never met for eons, but that DHHS made a strong argument for keeping, because sometimes they're just needed. That's the one. So I don't know what they'll say now, but that was the one. I was just as far as listing and keeping standing committees apprised, it would be good if the chairs or the committees had like a running list of all the study committees they've approved for the House, like during the course of a term, so they could see something like this.
Yeah, that
That's
was
why
one-
we did that.
One of my earliest comments was that mapping exercise.
Yes.
To map them all in, and also that would help us identify any orphans that are out there that aren't recognized by the committees that they have responsibility for.
And as you know, when you change administrations, or so you have new chairs, there's continuity. Representative Hunt knows everything, he has it all memorized, but when you have some committees that have had chairs, a constant change, that continuity can get lost.
Right.
Well, and that's part of the idea with building this infrastructure and these new systems. We've got to build continuity into the program, so
Exactly.
things aren't lost from change to change.
Right.
I have faith we'll do it.
Thank you.
Any last comments or questions for Ann? Thank you so much. I know this is a lot of work, and thank you to your team for all the work that they've been doing.
So we're gonna wait for more from Deborah, and then we can sort of make a plan on what we want to do with the
Yeah.
sleepy committees. Okay.
Any last comments? Our next meeting is going to be 2 weeks from today, because of Memorial Day next week.
June something or other. June 5th.
June 5th. All right.
Our clerk has stated it will be June 5th.
Oh, thank you for stepping up and being clerk, too. Thank you. Yeah.
1 o'clock, yeah, it sounds like a good time. Look at how many people we got here today. And
Yeah.
it gives everybody a chance to get their stuff together on Monday morning, because sometimes I used to come in and
Yeah, if you
when I
can't,
worked full-time.
if you can't make it, please let me know, because in case where it's questionable whether we get a quorum or not. I hate to drag people to Concord just to send them back home.
I can tell you already, I won't be here that day.
I hope everybody got the little two-liner reminder that I sent out, and it worked.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. See you in 2 weeks. And to the staff, again, thank you so much for your hard work and diligence in this stuff. I know it's a little bit
Mr.
dry.
Chair.